All right, we're live.
Great. All right, well, good afternoon and welcome to what I believe is the first ever Stanford Maritime Technology Conference hosted at the Graduate School of Business. So my co-host, Stephen Ferrer, and I are grateful for all of you that have decided to share your afternoon with us. I know we have some folks coming in from Europe, the East Coast of the US, and as far as East Africa. So really appreciate you staying up late for those of you in Europe and Africa. For those of you who are here in Palo Alto and have decided to be indoors on this beautiful day, we're grateful for you for showing up. So over the next couple of hours, we're going to hear from an incredible group of speakers who have kindly volunteered their time to speak with us about some of the most pressing challenges and opportunities for the maritime industry. This is the industry that powers the world economy, the industry that drives 90% of global trade, and the industry that enables all of us with a couple swipes on our phone to have almost anything we want show up from around the world within a matter of days. Now, the purpose of bringing all these people together is to get 360-degree insight on a single question. What are the three greatest challenges for the maritime industry today and in the future? And how can technology address those challenges? Now, every one of our speakers has been asked to speak for 15 minutes on this prompt, and then we'll have an additional 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A. So feel free to float in and out of the room, join for what you can. We know it's going to be a great conversation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stephen to introduce our first speaker.
Thanks for kicking us off, Joe. And for our first speaker, we have Abhishek Nair from PortXchange. He's coming in at 10 p.m. in Rotterdam, so we're very grateful for his time and his schedule flexibility here. Abhishek is no stranger to the seas. He spent 17 years sailing, moving cargo, most recently as a captain. He's moved to shoreside. He was port superintendent and is now the director of business development for a very cool company called PortXchange. Their data platform based in Rotterdam. They focus on port optimizations and berthing scheduling. I think it's one of the coolest companies I've seen come across so far. And there's a big impact here that they can have on climate and sustainability. This is an issue that Abhishek is also very passionate about. When he was doing his master's degree at Erasmus University, he wrote 2 papers on the alternate fuels for shipping industry. So with that, we'll let Abhishek take it away.
Thanks, Stephen, and thanks, Joe. Thanks so much for the introduction. And yes, I mean, as Joe points out, it is an industry that is so critical to supply chains. It's so critical for everyday life. And we need to move forward. We need to set the path forward. And by the end of this afternoon, I'm sure each one of you who's listening in will leave this room with some actionable insights as to how you can contribute to the future of cargo transportation. And I'm happy to get the ball rolling. So I'd like to discuss 3 challenges: supply chain disruptions, decarbonization, and the human factor. Now, as Stephen just said, I have spent a good part of the late 90s, 2000s, and the 2010s out on the high seas and navigating ships in and out of ports around the world. Over the ages, age-old methods and techniques of navigation and cargo handling operations have evolved. You take the case of satellite navigation systems, containerization, and more recently, electronic charts. These are all more or less pervasive now. But what has not changed is that a port call remains the most unpredictable element of the entire voyage. You heard me right. It's not the weather, it's not the depth of water under the ship's keel, it's not the captain's mood either. On departure, seeing the fading lights of the port in the distance, that is probably the best moment of a voyage for every crew member. So it's the port call that's so unpredictable. So why are port calls so unpredictable? And that brings me to the first challenge facing the shipping and ports industry: disruptions to supply chains. Now, I will argue that supply chains are inherently volatile and are in a constant state of flux. Every few years, supply chains will reset, form new shapes, new cargoes, new products, new origins, new destinations. These all will arise on the back of new socioeconomic and geopolitical dynamics. That is the name of the game. Ports need to be resilient in how they can flatten out these huge variations to be operationally efficient in the long term. However, on a day-to-day basis, there are so many moving parts, and every player in the chain is dependent on a timely and logical flow of information from an adjacent player. Every stakeholder in a port call, be it the port authority, an agent, a terminal, a bunker supplier, depends on information flows from someone else. And in essence, it's blinding oneself to the bigger picture. This flow of information is often critical in operational decision making. And right now, we as an industry, we just keep finding excuses to maintain the status quo. A small disruption in any one part of the chain will send shock waves across the entire network. Ports are invariably at the very epicenter of these shocks because it is here that transport modalities are exchanged. So a port is the only player in the entire chain whose actions and strategies will affect every other party. Take the example of the grounding of the Ever Given in the Suez Canal in March last year. While the vessel remained aground for a week in the Suez Canal, the cargo terminal in Northwest Europe had still maintained a berthing slot for that ship for early April. And then in early April, they just kept extending it by a day on a daily basis for another 2 weeks. And there were all liners and consequently terminals were changing their schedules every few hours as the optimization scenarios kept evolving. Now, did it serve any purpose to hold on to a berthing slot for a ship that wasn't going to arrive for a month, when that slot could have been easily given or exchanged with other ships in the area which were waiting for a berth? Now, yes, you will have industry stalwarts saying this was a black swan event. We were not prepared for it. You couldn't plan for it. Well, schedule reliabilities of liners have been quantifiably measured for a long time now. On a monthly basis per trade lane, it was down to a historic low of 30% during 2021 for some of the major trade lanes. Yet, terminals still continue working their operational planning basis of pro forma schedules and iterated upon by periodic ETA updates on email, when the need of the hour is real-time schedule optimization tools, which are already out there in the market, probably in different industries. So the median time spent by container ships in ports globally is 0.8 days. While in the US, this figure is 1.25 days. That is 56% higher than the global median. Do we need to bridge this gap? Well, most certainly yes. Because the amount of time a ship spends in port, that is a very, very large determinant of freight rates. It has been determined that a 10% increase in freight rates has a recessionary effect of 1% on industrial production in the US and Euro area. So how do we help these ports to make the step change? Here is one. Every user in the community, in the port community, is an expert, is an expert within the microcosm of their own silo. And we can exponentially grow each user's sphere of influence by connecting them to every other user within a port community. To reap the collective benefits of expertise in any port community, we can share relevant data safely in real time to augment one's decision-making process. and make it one that harnesses the collective expertise of manpower, artificial intelligence, and machinery, driving improvements in operational efficiency. So at PortXchange, we have been collaborating with our partners to do this and seen up to 12% reduction in waiting times just by simply streamlining data flows. So yes, it can be done. The second challenge that the industry faces is decarbonization. So the shipping industry contributes to 3% of the global anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. If it were a country by itself, it would be number 6 on the list. The IPCC's assessment report 5 estimated that in order for us to stay within the 2-degree global warming threshold, by 2050, we would already need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by at least 41 to 72%. That's from a 2005 baseline. And here's where the story gets interesting. The IMO, which is the global shipping body, in their 4th greenhouse gas study, they estimated that in a business as usual scenario, the shipping industry is on track to increase its emissions by 90 to 130%. So that is a profound disparity. You need to reduce by 41 to 72%, and here you're the shipping industry that is on track to increase its emissions by 90 to 130%. So it's a profound disparity and a gap that badly needs to be filled. So the transition to zero carbon fuels will eventually happen. There's no doubt that we are going in that direction. But the timeline for it is extremely fluid. So we don't have the time for that. So what can be already done? So right now, what we often overlook is there are 4.3 million port arrivals happening annually that are needed to facilitate the ship-shore interface and the handling of goods in and out of the captive hinterland. And this can be optimized on a daily basis. So this is where ports, they need to set the tone as to how operations need to be conducted in an operationally efficient manner. Decarbonization and improving operational efficiency, they go hand in hand. You cannot decouple them. Every minute saved in cargo handling and port operations is a minute added to the cargo carrying capacity of the existing fleet, boosting its productivity and reducing emissions. And then we come to the third challenge, which to me is the most important one, the human factor and leadership, which is going to be critical in any challenge that we need to surmount in this industry. So let me put that in perspective. The last few weeks have been conference season out here in Northwest Europe. I went to one where the theme was emerging tech in ports, and you had chief innovation officers, chief technology officers of ports talking about connected ports, using technology to reduce their carbon footprint, unleashing the power of artificial intelligence. It was simply paradise. A week later, I was at a trade fair where you had senior business leaders of the very same ports, from the business development and commercial divisions, who gave me a blank stare on bringing up supply chain disruptions and how technology could help them provide a better service to their own customers. Some of them even got upset with me for wasting their time. Now don't get me wrong on this. Each one of them is doing a great job for their organization. There is no doubt about that. But the need of the hour is one aligned vision and concerted goals for each and every person in this industry to move towards. So I was listening to a recent interview of Bill Ford, where he describes an impermeable clay in the middle of any organization, that needs to be broken through to ensure alignment with goals and values across the organization. In our case, we are dealing with an industry that is as old as mankind itself. So it's an uphill task, but it can be done. We need to constantly educate the industry at every level. What is at stake here? How is it that technology helps you, your organization, and the industry at large? We need to show a clear business case that is extremely important for adopting technology and work with the naysayers. You will have so many naysayers at every step. You need to work with them, hear their concerns, and alleviate them. Now, I have done enough of, I'd say, industry bashing over the last 10 minutes to be considered a pariah at any future industry events. But so we have to give due credit where it's due. So let's not forget the industry's contribution in keeping the world fed, vaccinated, and the engines of the economy running. But what this is about getting better. How do we move forward from here? How do we set the path forward? The way we manage our ports, ships, and the people within this industry has far-reaching implications on economic growth and environmental protection. Lastly, we are at a point where we need to take action to move the needle for a sustainable future of cargo transportation. A fear of failure can no longer prevent us from experimenting. You need to do experiments. It's only then that we will learn. Innovation is key, and the industry is warming up to it. You're seeing lots of different pilots going on, lots of new startups coming up with great products, bringing from different other industries and trying to implement them here in the maritime and port sector. So it is up to the industry, it's up to these industry stalwarts, it's up to leaders to try them out and see what works best for them. It is, again, all of us here in this panel, you have gathered up a great panel here for speaking. It's for people from this panel, it's for this audience that who's listening to this, that need to catalyze action and set that chain reaction going. So those are my 10 cents. Over to you, Steve Joe.
That was awesome, Abhishek. Thank you so much. A lot of great threads there. A couple interesting questions that I have in my mind, and we can also pull in some questions from the audience here, is you talk about, improving efficiency, and there's this alignment between all the different actors in this very complicated system. Kind of one thing that is very important in this industry is the people who are like working the docks, piloting the ships, captaining the ships. How do you see, improvements in efficiency potentially threatening some of the labor aspects of this industry? And yeah, how do we reconcile, and we can improve efficiency, but does that mean that some people win and some other people lose?
Well, Stephen, your question is very timely because of the current negotiations that are going on between the PMA and the ILWU. Yeah. The way I would look at it is you definitely have to take a long-term view. In the short term, you will always have, there are some losers and there are somebody who's going to gain. But if you're looking at the long term, in the long term, there are going to be changes in how a particular job needs to be done. Yeah. And we need to look at how can every job be done more efficiently. Because what happens is, as I was saying, the time a ship spends in port is a very, very large determinant of freight rates. Yeah. And when freight rates go high, it's not just, some exporter or some importer who's paying the price. It is we, the end consumer, the people who go out to supermarkets and buy a banana, you're buying pens for your children, you're buying books for your children. It's we who are going to be paying that price. So we have to take a long-term view on this. The long-term view is about getting more efficient. We cannot stick to the same old, old ways of doing things, because we're just losing money on that. Yeah, it's a great point. I agree.
there's a lot of efficiency that can come from this. And the other thing that we've seen is quite interesting is like there aren't enough young people going into this industry either. So it kind of in some ways, the industry may need to automate to kind of exist.
Yeah. So that definitely, that change does happen in pockets, very much depending on what the current demography is in different regions. But yes, automation is slowly taking pace, especially in areas where you have a very large gap between the demography where you have the old folks and the younger folks. So there definitely automation is definitely taking a lot of precedence for sure.
Before we turn into the audience, I see we have one person here, Anthony. And one other thought I had is, what are some industries that you touch on, like real-time information and data sharing? Are there industries where you've seen that you look at for inspiration?
Well, one thing I can say is within the maritime sector, the one sector they always look towards is aviation. They always look towards, okay, what is happening in aviation? And this comes in multiple layers, even in terms of navigation and how to operate safely. Even you typically find that new techniques and new concepts first get adopted within the aviation sector, and then they percolate down to shipping. Yeah. Now, when you go to an airport, you can just, there are always the screens, and they show you exactly when your flight is expected. If she gets delayed at her previous airport, you get that information right away. And that's a few hours out, you already have real-time information about this. Why can't we do this with ships when right now the technology already exists? There are quite a few out there who will say, ships are employing very high-tech AIS technology. No, AIS is not high-tech. AIS is very simple. It works on radio frequencies. So and that's been available for ages. So you can already start using that. It's dirt cheap.
That's great. I like that. Joe, do you want to pull in Anthony, or do you want to? How do you want to do the questions here? There we go. Anthony,
right. Oh, cool. Oh, well, this was fast. Well, thank you so much. This is super exciting. I'm a student here at Stanford. I'm relatively uninformed about this industry. Also, the reason why I'm here and listening in. I think one question I had on your elaborations on how technology can solve this and how it's sort of to the industry to educate the naysayers, especially here on the East Coast. I think when I hear about the maritime industry and I read in the newspaper, we have supply chain constraints, and that's the reason why my Amazon products get more expensive, day after day. But they always push it sort of towards, COVID-19, and there are all these lockdowns in Chinese cities that will make it even more difficult. And I think as an uninformed person, how much of that is sort of external and technology will only solve part of it, and how much of maybe even some of those issues can be solved by using technology? I hope my question's clear.
Thanks, Anthony. So yes, you cannot look at ports and shipping in a vacuum. They are operating in a global environment. You have to consider, what geopolitical issues are there. Looking at factors like COVID-19 and closures in China where they take a complete zero COVID policy, and you have one case of COVID and they shut down the entire city. So yes, you have to be looking at what is happening externally. But what really plagues this industry is a lack of transparency. So in this particular case, when you have, let's say, a shutdown in let's say Shanghai, and you already know ships are going to be skipping those ports, you should be already expecting those disruptions. And a ship typically takes from Shanghai to, let's say, she's coming into to the West Coast, to Los Angeles, Long Beach. That's a voyage of about 12 to 14 days. So already 12 to 14 days out, you already know that this is good. There's going to be a shock wave there. You're not going to be expecting this cargo. So that is enough time for you to already start planning ahead as to what you want to do next. So obviously with what has happened with COVID-19 is in supply chains, manufacturers realize that they need to start increasing their inventory levels. They already know that. But when you have something like this 12 to 14 days out, you already know, hey, this consignment is not going to show up. So if I tell you 12 to 14 days out that, hey, you're expecting this, but I'm telling you almost 2 weeks out that you are not going to be receiving this. If I were a customer, if somebody gives me this information 2 weeks out, I'll be happy with it. I don't want to be, the day that I'm expecting to receive a particular consignment and somebody tells me the night before, that's exactly what's happening right now. You get to know at the last minute that, hey, my consignment is not coming in. When this information was privy to you 14 days ago.
It's a great
And Anthony, did I answer you?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I noticed I can't speak unless Joe and Stephen give me permission to. Yeah, thank you, Abhishek. That was perfect. That helps a lot. Appreciate it.
All right. If there's final pause here for any questions. Otherwise, we can close out this set and move on to the next one.
I might just jump in with one more question, Abhishek. So yeah, there's a quote you brought up about the difference in the average time that a container ship spends in port and the discrepancy between US ports and ports around the world. Could you speak a little bit more to some of the technologies that might shorten that gap? I understand we talked a little bit about some of the policy issues or some of the differences, but maybe some of the technologies that could unlock that.
Yeah. So when you look at median time spent in ports, of course, you also have to look at most of the US ports are gateway ports. They're not transshipment ports. Most of them are gateway ports. So you have large export and import numbers coming into the US as well as going out. So typically what happens is you will have ports like Los Angeles, Long Beach, or if you're looking on the East Coast, you're looking at Savannah, Charleston, New York. These typically tend to be at the end of a particular trade lane. So you have a complete changeover. So yes, you are probably expecting that, yes, on these particular ports, these ships might spend a little more time than the global median, but 56% is a huge number. So now the different aspects that you can do to reduce your time spent in ports. Number one is increase productivity while you're in port. And that means, yes, your cranes have to be working at the right capacity. Now, if you look at what the nominal number of container moves per hour are in the US ports, and you compare them to the nominal number of container moves in Asian ports, there's a big difference. There's a big difference. From a few years back, I can already tell you that that even that is a gap of at least 30 to 40%. So what is being taken as the norm here in the US would be considered as severely underperforming in Asian ports. So why is it that we cannot bring it up that standard? As I said, I mean, there will be challenges. You might come up with that. Hey, the labor union is creating roadblocks here. You might have, okay, the cranes are probably too old. Okay, fine. Then, yeah, change the cranes or come up with a new contract with the labor unions.
That was awesome. I see we have Olivia here that just joined. Abhishek, thank you so much for making time to speak with us today. That was incredible. It was great to hear your energy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. If you don't mind, I'll stay back, maybe in the background somewhere.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Thanks.
Feel free to join.
We hoped you would, and thank you for staying.
As I said, it's the best part of the day.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you staying on so late. Thank you, Abhishek.
Thanks.
Stephen, will you stop the recording so
Yep.